Bismillah wa alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Let us go with some of the questions that we had from the last session. Can a woman make intentions for the entire month of Ramadan when she is on her cycle? Let's say at the very beginning of the month that she's on her cycle, and she wants to make the intention 3 or 4 days before Ramadan comes in, that she's going to fast the entire month of Ramadan. Does that intention suffice, right? She's, basically at the end of Ramadan, she's also going to be on her cycle, right? Or she may also be on her cycle at the end of Ramadan. So even if she were to make the intention of fasting the entire month of Ramadan, she may not even get to the entire month. So what's best is that she do the intention, that she renew the intention when she is free of her cycle, right? The night before that, the day of fasting, that she renew that intention. That's what we would recommend, right? And so when a woman is nursing, how should she decide whether to fast? Does it matter how old the child is, newborn versus 1 year old? So basically, to go by the opinion of a medical doctor or by her midwife, a woman in the community who pretty much knows her stuff and has been around the block, or maybe even her own experience with previous children. She knows, how taxing it was on her body and whether or not she can actually maintain the fast. So all of these would be measures for when the woman could. The nursing woman could do that. And there is a section here on nursing, and we're going to get to that. So I'll leave that detail. There's a few more details. I'll leave that for when we get to that section. Are vaccinations allowed during fasting? Not nourishing, but protecting. So basically, in the Mālikī madhab, the only injections that invalidate the fast, where you have to make up the fast, and let's say for necessity, just for necessity. So if there's a medical necessity and you take an injection and that injection gets into the stomach, in other words, we're not talking about an injection that gets into the bloodstream and it's just in the bloodstream. We're talking literally about what makes its way to the stomach, and that's through the ducts. For example, you'll get it and to where it gets into one of the ducts where it's tasted in the throat, or it's it's there in the throat, or it gets right into the stomach. Somehow it gets to the stomach and it follows the track that leads to the stomach. That's for IV, certain IVs where there's nourishment, or a feeding tube or something like that. That's pretty much the only thing that's going to invalidate the fast. And for necessity purpose, for purposes of necessity, if a person takes such an injection, all he has to do is make up the day later, and if it's not for necessity, let's say it's a vitamin K IV or something like that, or a vitamin IV. There's certain doctors who will administer IVs that are vitamin just to strengthen a person or something like that, but it's not necessity. It's just something that they get done. Then he makes up that day and he does the kafara, which is the expiation. And so to answer the question, all of these vaccinations for COVID or whatnot, these do not enter into the stomach, and they are just fine. You can take you can take them without even batting an eyelid. Regarding sound mind, what sort of mental health concerns recuse people from their fasting obligations? So sound mind here, mental health concerns. So if a person's got anxiety or depression and is taking medicine, for example, then to set that medicine up to where you can take it right at sunset and then another dose right at suhoor time, you'll be good to go. I mean, those are not medical necessities where you are justified in, or mental health issues where you are justified in breaking the fast. But if you have someone who is not able to discern, right? You're just not able to discern. And now we're talking about a more serious mental health issue, right? That where hallucination or schizophrenia, or we're talking about more serious mental health issues where a person is just not able to, he's just not there, right? And you discuss with him, you ask him questions, and he's not able to distinguish, right? Or discern. For such a person, fasting is not obligatory. Prayer is not obligatory. Rufi'a anhu al-qalam. The Prophet ﷺ has said that the pen has been lifted from him. And so we're really talking about cognitive awareness here. If one was like Alzheimer's or something like that, right? If one was intending to fast a mandatory fast outside of Ramadan earlier on in the night, but woke up too late for suhoor and changed his mind still before Fajr, is that okay? Yeah, it's still before Fajr. If it's still before Fajr, you're good, right? And that's a mandatory fast. You're good as long as it's still before Fajr. You can change your mind 7 times. Whatever you can, am I going to fast tonight? You can flip a coin. Whatever as long as you have that intention before Fajr, and that's your final intention before Fajr, that I'm going to fast today, then that's okay. You can change your mind before or not, based on your schedule, based on, are we going to travel tomorrow? Are we not going to travel tomorrow? There might be circumstances like this that put a person in doubt. So just as long as it's before Fajr, the mandatory fast is valid, as long as that intention is made before Fajr. The first rukn or pillar was making intention the night before, and the second was for the arkan. Oh, the arkan. So the first. Oh wow! Did I just slipped my mind? We just went over it. This is good. It keeps it fresh in our minds. So what page is this? Don't want to lose my page. 127. Yeah. How is this slipping my mind? We just went over this. Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah, okay. So it's because it's just too obvious to it's to actually go through with it, right? So the first intention is that the first rukn is intention, and the second rukn is the actual abstinence, right? It's just so obvious, it's easily missed. Okay, and so we go back now and we say, let's see, do the 2 people sighting the hilal have to be men? That's a very good question. So and it's based on the verse in the Quran that 2 witnesses the 2 witnesses come forward, that they be 2 men, and if not, then a man and 2 women, so that one of the women can remind the other. That is understood in the context of contract law and business law. The context of that verse really has to do with business, and it's got to do with commerce and trade. And it was not the forte of the women at the time of the Prophet ﷺ when these verses were revealed. They were not as experienced and as well versed as the men were in the buying and selling of things, and notwithstanding Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha wa ardaha. So in general, right, this law came down to answer that circumstance. Now, if you have the situation where we're trying to sight the hilal, and it's in a city, for example, where we're just not, we don't take it seriously. We don't go out every month. We don't have that experience of going out and trying to see the hilal every month and messing up in trial by error. We're not seasoned. Then in that case, whether 2 men come forward or 2 women come forward, or a man and 2 women, or a woman and 2 men, in that case, it's the stipulation here, or that qiyas, that analogy, right? Because where did they get the two just people, or 2 people of integrity? Where did they get that from? They get that from the verse. In in this case, the analogy is not we don't take the full implications of that verse and apply it here in this situation, because both the men and the women are ignorant and inexperienced. And so if you have two honest, upright women who saw it, then we would take their testimony, and the next day would be Ramadan. If Day of Doubt falls on a Monday or Thursday, and we usually fast Sunnah, can we fast? Yes, as long as you do not have the intention of Ramadan with that intention, because it's the Day of Doubt. So sure, go ahead and fast that day, but and we covered that. And for women who get their cycles, how do they do 60 days of expiation? They build on it, right? So if they got to day 35 and then the cycle comes, and they're out for the count for about 3 or 4 days or whatever, however many days, then she goes back and she continues counting from the days prior, and she adds to them. In the case of fornication, if the woman is not Muslim, does the man only expiate for himself? That's a great question. That's a great question. Yeah, he only expiates for himself because expiation is not required for her, because she's not even required to fast, and her fast is not valid. None of these laws apply to her. Sometimes wives and so I read this question in detail. So when we're talking about slavery, we're talking about literal slavery. So we're not talking about, economic slavery. We're not talking about a situation where a person might feel enslaved in the house, like from the treatment of a spouse or something like that. We're talking about a slave, and so that ruling no longer applies, right? So some of what we're reading no longer applies. Okay, so with that, inshallah, let us continue. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barak ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim tasliman kathira. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. No. Oh, and the 2.5 kilograms is a mistake in the book. It's a mistake. 2.5 kilograms, literally, it's more than 5 pounds of food. And if you're stipulating that the hands be the size of an average man's hands, right? There's no way you're going to get 2.5 kilograms of grain or rice in these hands, right? And 2.5 kilograms of rice, that's going to feed an entire tribe, right? That's going to feed all the neighbors on your street, right? That's about 5 pounds of rice that you're cooking up that day, and it's supposed to be for one meal. So that's a bit of a typo there. So it's 2.5 pounds, right? 2.5 pounds. So the equivalent of which is about 2.5 pounds, and that's more than enough for a person to eat in his meal as well. So and that's about how much you can get into your hands. So when I read that, I was just really like, how do you do that? How do you get 2.5 kilograms of grain in two hands? I mean, if you have the hands of a giant, but we just said that the hands got to be average size. Okay. وليس على من أفطر في قضاء رمضان متعمدا. So يقول المصنفون رحمهم الله تعالى ورضي الله تعالى عنهم وحفظهم الله تعالى آمين وجزاهم عنا خير جزاء. وليس على من أفطر في قضاء رمضان متعمدا قضاء على الأرجح وإنما عليه قضاء الأصل فقط. And that's where we left off. So we're going to continue. ويحرم على الصائم المتطوع الفطر لعزيمة يعزمها عليه شخص وإن حلف عليه بالطلاق الثلاث إلا لوجه كولد وشيخ وإن لم يحلفا فيجوز له الفطر بأمرهما ولا قضاء عليه. So a person who is fasting in a voluntary fast, right? If you've got a voluntary fast going, and we said that the Mālikīs are particularly, and I don't want to give the impression that the other madhabs are not, but I just know this about the Mālikī madhab in particular, that the Mālikīs are quite particular about finishing the acts of worship all the way through, even if they are voluntary. So if you are fasting a voluntary fast, let's say it's a Monday or Thursday, or the day following one of the bright nights, and then you are invited to partake of a meal, like you find yourself that you're walking around with some friends, and then someone invites you over for a meal, and you go and you sit with your friends, but you're fasting, right? You're fasting. So what do you do in that case? It is haram. It is haram. يحرم على الصائم المتطوع الفطر لعزيمة يعزمها عليه شخص. So it is haram for you to stop your fast. You must continue your fast, even if the host swore that he would divorce his wife 3 times. Right, and this is speaking to a modern habit of in the Muslim world, where the host, out of his magnanimous generosity with his guests, he will say, "If you don't eat that piece of meat, I will divorce my wife 3 times irrevocably," and you put him in big trouble if you don't eat that meat. So this is a way of making sure that you are going to eat your full at his table, right? And they consider this generosity, right? Poor woman. I mean, she's the one who's been cooking that whole day in the kitchen, and she overhears her husband swearing to divorce her if guest so and so, and she doesn't even like the guest. It's one of his friends. If guest so and so doesn't, eat the meat. And so basically her marriage hangs in the balance based on how this guest is going to respond to this. It's ignorance. It's compounded ignorance. And he said, so even if that's the case, and this is one way of eradicating that ignorant practice, is that, knowing that, okay, if he's fasting, he's not going to eat my food. If he's fasting, he's not going to eat my food. So I better stop this idiotic threat. كَوَلَدٍ وَشَيْخٍ, and then he says, إِلَّا لِوَجْهٍ, except in one aspect. If your son or your daughter is the one who is hosting you, you're the parent, and you're at your daughter's house, you're at your son's house, and they're saying, eat, right? Just eat. Then you can eat, right? Or a sheikh, right? Who is basically someone who is older than you, a much older person. So basically your children, or someone who is much older, or someone who has a certain standing in the community, like a sheikh, because a sheikh literally means an older person. So a sheikh, or like your teacher, something like that. Even if they didn't swear an oath, then it's okay for you. يَجُوزُ لَهُ الْفِطْرُ بِأَمْرِهِمَا. It is permissible for you to break that fast by their command, at their command. وَلَا قَضَاءَ عَلَيْهِ. And he doesn't have to make that up. You don't have to make that up. Okay? Because you were commanded to do so, and it's against your will. So you don't have to make that fast up. أمور لا توجب القضاء. لا قضاء بخروج قيء غلبه إذا لم يزدرد منه شيئا بعد إمكان طرحه، ولا مما سبق إلى الحلق من غالب ذباب أو بعوض أو غالب غبار طريق أو غالب غبار طريق أو دخان حطب ولو تعمد استنشاقه. All right. So there is no expiation. There's no what's the word? Qada, to make up. There's no making up a fast when a person, when there is vomit that overcomes a person, right? When there's vomit that overcomes a person, if the person did not swallow after being able to expel it. Okay, so sometimes there. Sometimes it's either vomit or it's just some of the food that you eat. Sometimes it comes back up in the throat, and you can even taste it in the back of your throat. If you swallow it, then if you swallow it down and it goes back down, right? Akramakumullah. Then you have one of two scenarios. Either you swallowed it before you were able to expel it. And in that case, you're good. If you were able to expel it, right? If it came up and you were actually able to expel it, and you did not expel it and you swallowed it instead, then you've got to make up that day. You've got to make up that day. And that's the thing. That's the same for flies or insects or mosquitoes, or even the dust in the road, or the smoke, right? Smoke from wood, right? Wood smoke. All of these things, if they entered into your mouth, or they entered into your nose, then you don't have to make this up. You don't have to make this up because this was without your this is out there. وَلَوْ تَعَمَّدَ اسْتِنْشَاقُهُ. He said, and even if you knew that there was dirt on that there was smoke in the there was wood smoke from wood fire. There's a way of saying that elegantly, or there's dust in the road. If you knew that and you still are breathing and talking and everything, and you know it, you still don't need to make any of that up. وأما دخان القدر وبخاره وبخور العود والمستكى ونحوها ففيه القضاء لأنه يتكيف به الدماغ ومن ذلك الدخان الذي يشرب أو يستنشق بخلاف رائحة نحو المسك والعنبر. Okay, so however, if we're talking about the smoke that comes out of a cooking pot, or the steam that comes out of it, or the smoke that comes from incense, or the chewing gum, right? There's like this chewing gum. It's called mastic, right? Mastic, and it's an aromatic gum or a resin that exudes from the bark of a Mediterranean tree that's used in making varnish and chewing gum and as a flavoring. So there's this nasty gum that my parents' generation would have. It has no taste whatsoever, but it comes in a gum wrapper and everything, so it gets you all excited that I'm going to have some gum, and then you put it in your mouth, and it's just like why do people chew this? It's just something to chew on. That's all it is. It's just something to chew on. Like you could chew on a piece of rubber or something like that. That's and get more like. So if it's any of these things, right? Then وَمِن ذَلِكَ الدُّخَانِ الَّذِي يُشْرَبُ, and also cigarette smoke, right? Cigarette smoke that you've inhaled. If that cigarette smoke and you've inhaled it, if it gets down into the throat, right? Then you've got to make that day up. And this is not the case for the fragrance of musk or amber and oud and things like this. فَإِنَّهُ يُكْرَهُ فَقَطْ لِتَحْرِيكِهِ الشَّهْوَةِ, because these are makruh, because what they do is they arouse desire. And it was also said that they're not makruh. وَلَا قَضَاءَ فِي غَالِبِ الدَّقِيقِ لِنَحْوِ الطُّحَانِ وَنَاخِلِ. So before we continue, these are things that may be new to some people, that incense, lighting incense, that could be actually, that could nullify your fast. And one of the reasons that they give here, or the reason that they give, is لأنه يتكيف به الدماغ. It's because the mind, when you inhale that, it's like it's to take you into a different space, right? You're like, so that thing, that like the same thing with the you have these essential oil diffusers and everything, so these things are to be avoided. They're to be avoided during the fast because they're يتكيف به الدماغ, basically, is that you get you get this enjoyment where it's literally just taking you into a different space altogether. And so that may be a feature just of the Maliki madhab. I'm not sure how it is in the other madhab. But it is there in the Maliki madhab. So then he says, وَلَا قَضَاءَ عَلَى غَالِبِ الدَّقِيقِ لِنَحْوِ طَحَّانٍ وَالنَّاخِلٍ. So a person who is in the business of like this is his trade. He's like a baker and he's a sifter, right? He has a sieve and he's got this food there, the grains, and he's sifting through it. And then the what would you call it? The whatever it comes off of the wheat and is just in there, the particles in the air, if he inhales that, then he's okay because this is actually his business. He can't get away from it. He's a baker, right? وَلَا غُبَارَ جِبْسٍ لِصَانِعِهِ وَلَا غُبَارَ كَيْلٍ لِمُغَرْبِلٍ. And so this is for someone who's involved in wheat or grains, or someone who's also doing gypsum, right? He's there. And gypsum is it's this material that is used in building. It's also used in making casts. It's used in making these when you get your teeth aligned, they'll take the impressions. It's used in making certain impressions, dental impressions. So if you're involved in making gypsum and gypsum products and the powder when it's mixed with the water and all of that, if that gets up in the air and you inhale that, then that's okay because this is your profession. ومن ذلك من يتولى أمور نفسه من هذه الأشياء. And likewise for the do-it-yourselfers, right? For those who this may not be their profession, but they're actually engaged in in this as though it was their profession. وَلَا مِنْ حَفْرِ الْأَرْضٍ لِحَاجَةٍ. But this does not apply also, and also for a person who is digging up the earth and then the dust gets up, أو نقل تراب لغرض, or he moves dirt from one place to another for a certain intention. So this is all okay. It's all okay. You don't have to make that up. Oh no. Yeah, you don't have to make that up. But like we said before, if you're just lighting incense and things like that, then you'll need to make that up. وكذلك لا قضاء في حكنة في إحليل. Likewise, there is no making up a fast when you take a shot, right? Now we're talking about the shots, the injections, في إحليل. And the إحليل is in one of the areas where water passes from us, right? So in the tract, right? In the tract. So if you're taking a shot in the tract, that there's no making up that day. ولا في دهن جائفة في دهن جائفة وهي الجرح في البطن أو في الجنب الواصل للجوف. Nor if you are taking a shot in that which is you have a wound that is in the stomach, or in the on the side that is connected to the stomach, and janb al-wasil lil-jawf, that if you take a shot in that wound itself, like for anesthesia or something like that, then there's nothing that you need to make up in that case either. وما يقاس عليه. Let's see. ولا شيء على من اكتحل ليلا أو وضع شيئا في أذنه أو أنفه أو دهن رأسه فهبط شيء من ذلك لحلقه نهارا. So if you have applied kuhl or antimony to your eyes, or you have put some kind of an eardrop or something like that in your ear, or in a nose drop or something like that, or you have put some kind of a gel or oil in your hair, and some of that got into a duct where it reaches the throat. If you have done that at night, and then some of it is now felt in the throat during the day, then you're okay. But if you have done that during the day, then you have to make up that day and make up that fast. Right? If you did it during the day and fasting has already started, if you've done it after Fajr, basically, if you've done it after Fajr, and then that day has to be made up. But if you've done it before Fajr and then you sort of get that taste after the fasting has commenced, then you're okay. You don't have to make that up. ولا شيء على من نكش أذنه بعود ولا في بلع الريق أو ما بين الأسنان. And so this is useful here for all of us, I think, is that if you have if you've a Q-tip, if you use a Q-tip, that's all right, no big deal. But then also if you've swallowed your own saliva, or there's like particles that are left between the teeth or in the mouth, and you swallow that. It's better to expel it. But if you happen to swallow it, then that's okay. It's already stuck there between the teeth. Like ولا يفطر من احتلم في نهار رمضان ولا يفطر من احتلم في نهار رمضان ولا من احتجم والحجامة مكروهة للصائم خشية أن يصيبه إغماء أو ضعف. And so the person who has, let's say there is a wet dream, for example, or there is an ejaculation that happens during the days of Ramadan without the normal consequences or the normal circumstance that would bring about such an ejaculation, like a wet dream, for example, right? Without relations, or going to a cupper, right? If you go to a cupper, then you can continue fasting. You can continue fasting, or you should continue fasting. And if you don't, then you have to make up that day. وَالْحِجَامَةُ مَكْرُوهَةٌ لِلصَّائِمِ. And so, but cupping is discouraged for a fasting person. It is discouraged. Why? Because it could bring that person to a state of weakness, or could actually cause him to faint. So it is discouraged. It's makruh. Umurun ja'izatun lis-sa'imi. So these are now things that are permissible for the fasting person. These are permitted things to him. يجوز السواك طول النهار بعود يابس. So throughout the day, you can brush your teeth with a miswak that is dry, and by extension, a toothbrush that does not have toothpaste on it, right? So it's like a dry toothbrush. That is okay. وَيُكْرَهُ بِعُودٍ رَطِبٍ. And it is makruh to do so with a miswak that is moist, or with a toothbrush that is moist. ويحرم بالرطب المتحلل وإذا وصل طعمه إلى الحلق وجب القضاء اتفاقا والكفارة على المشهور. And so if you have a miswak that is now beginning to break apart, right? It's now beginning to, like, the fibers of it are now beginning to loosen and break apart. So it's no longer as sturdy as when you first got it, when it was dry. Then it is then what happens? Using that is haram. And if some of its flavor has reached the throat, if some of the flavor of it has reached the throat, then he has to make that day up. He has to continue fasting that day, but then he has to make it up. You continue fasting that day, but you make it up. And kafara, expiation, is the majority opinion among the Mālikīs. It is the majority opinion. So he has to make it up, and he has to do expiation. So this is very, very serious. It's very serious. وَتَجُوزُ الْمَضْمَضَةُ لِلْعَطْشِ وَالْحَرِّ or عطش والحر. And what is permissible is that you rinse out your mouth if you are in a state of extreme thirst, or if it's very, very hot outside and you just want to cool down, you just want to cool your mouth down, then you can rinse your mouth with water and expel that water. That's okay. ويجوز الإصباح بالجنابة مع الكراهة and waking up and entering the morning in a state of major ritual impurity, which is janaba, after having relations with your spouse, then that is permissible, although it is reprehensible. It's makruh, but it is within the realm of permissibility. It's not haram. It doesn't invalidate your fasting. And so the question then obviously is going to be related to brushing our teeth. Is brushing our teeth permissible or not during Ramadan? The brushing of the teeth with toothpaste. So that's the question. So my advice to you with respect to brushing the teeth is to brush your teeth before Fajr, right after suhoor. Brush your teeth, use your mouthwash. And they have these mouthwashes that last for 12 hours or something like that. They have all these ridiculous claims. Allah knows best if they work or not. I tried one out and didn't seem to work. And so, there's no doubt that throughout the day, the breath is going to change. The odor of the mouth is going to change, and that is directly related to the stomach, right? And so that's going to happen. And so, for a person who wants to, like the Prophet ﷺ has said that the changing of the breath of the mouth is more redolent with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the fragrance of musk itself, right? And he is saying that to a community who is concerned with how its breath is, right? And the Prophet ﷺ himself didn't allow people to come to the masjid with offensive breath, right? After having eaten raw onions or raw garlic or something like that, he said, do not offend your brothers by coming to the masjid for prayer. So pray at home, right? Pray at home. And so in this case, when a person wants to change the odor of his breath, especially if you're working or something like that, and you have people around you who are not Muslim, right? They're not Muslim, and you don't want to offend them with the breath. It is okay to use toothbrush during the day. That's okay, just as long as that the flavor of the toothpaste remains in the mouth and does not go into the throat. So you're going to have to do a very, very thorough job of making sure that after you have brushed your teeth, then that you are expelling any trace of that toothpaste in your mouth. You've just rinsed out thoroughly to where the breath, your breath is more pleasant, but it doesn't reach the throat, right? And so that's a task. And if you're going to do that, then do that just once. Don't do that 3 or 4 times a day, right? Where you're brushing your teeth every 3 or 4 hours, and so that should clarify that, inshallah. But it is better to use a miswak that is dry. That is best. Right. So even with the toothpaste is permissible, but it's not preferable. It is not. It's definitely not preferable, and it would be discouraged to do so. ويجوز الفطر في السفر بأربعة شروط. Okay, now we talk about travel, and permitted to the fasting person is that he breaks his fast in travel as long as 4 conditions are met. And yakuna safaru qasrin, that the travel be the distance that allows a person otherwise to shorten his prayers. So if you're traveling, let's say you're traveling pretty far distance, but it's not far away to where you can actually shorten your prayers, then you must continue fasting. You do not have that dispensation or that license to break your fast. You should continue fasting. And even if you are beyond that distance and you can shorten your prayers, fasting is still better for you than breaking your fast, right? Still better for you than breaking your fast. وَأَنْ يَكُونَ مُبَاحًا, right? And that the travel itself. And so what is that distance? That distance is about 55 miles, right? It's about 55 miles. Or what is even a better measure, it is whatever our culture has acknowledged as, okay, this is a trip, right? This is a trip. Because some people will go back and forth to work and they commute to work and they live about 65 miles away from work or 70 miles away. Some people commute for an hour and a half, and it's an hour and a half of driving, just driving, right? It's not backed up traffic. It's just an hour and a half of driving. You drive out of the city to, and so you're not going, because you didn't pack a bag for that. You didn't pack a bag for that. That's not a journey. That's not a trip. Right? It's not a trip. So to combine your prayers and to shorten your prayers in that sense, and this is like, you're just going back and forth to work, right? That is not, that is not, well, technically you're beyond 55 miles, but that's not really traveling in terms of the urf, right? In terms of our cultural understanding of what travel is. So that would not apply. And you should not combine your prayers or shorten them. وأن يكون مباحا, and this is something that is particular to the Mālikī madhab, that the travel itself must be a permissible travel. It must be like, you're not going to go to Vegas and break and say, I'm going to Vegas for a few days to gamble. And you're going to take advantage of these licenses of shortening your prayers and combining your prayers and breaking your fast in Ramadan, right? So the travel itself has to be a permissible travel. This may seem intuitive to you, but it's a stipulation in the Mālikī madhab, whereas it's not in the other madhab. And I remember reading in some of the other madhab that whether or not the travel is permissible or not, then it doesn't make a difference, right? Because you are beyond the limits of the travel, and you can do these things, right? And then you have to do tawbah on its side, right? Like you're going to Vegas, you've got to do tawbah for the gambling on the side, but by combining your prayers, that's actually the sunnah, because you're away from home, right? So that's their take on it. In the Mālikī madhab, no, we are not letting you slide. You are not sliding with the past. There's no ease in this, right? You're out on your own, buddy, and don't look for the deen to make anything else easier on you. وأن يشرع فيه قبل الفجر إن كان أول يوم, and that he begins the travel before Fajr, right? So let's say you're going to take a trip. If you leave after Fajr, or if you are within the distance, right? You're within the distance, and Fajr comes in, and you're still not at that point where you could have combined your prayers, right? So you must fast on that day. You've got to fast on that day, because you began the day fasting and you were a resident at home, right? Fajr came and you were still a resident at home, even though you were 30 miles out or 40 miles out or 50 miles out or 54 miles out. You weren't 55 miles out, right? You weren't at that point where, okay. And basically, in the books of the Mālikīs, they said basically it's when the walls of the city and the homes of the city, where all of that begins to fade into the background, right? Now you're out in the open. And that's when you can travel. That's when you can combine your prayers. You're far away from the city center. Or from where, it's just we ain't in Kansas anymore, right? So that's the idea. So you have to begin the travel before Fajr. وأن يبيت نية الفطر في السفر, and that you have the intention of breaking your fast. You have the intention of not fasting before at that night, right? In that night, you have the intention of not fasting because of the travel, right? So those are the four conditions for which a person can take the dispensation of breaking his fast due to travel. ويجوز الفطر للمريض إن خاف زيادة المرض أو تأخر البرء أو حدوث مرض ويجب الفطر إن خاف هلاكا أو شديد أذى. And so here, if a person is sick now, and he fears that his sickness will worsen, or that his healing will be delayed due to the fast. Like he's fasting and he's thinking this fast is going to make things much worse for me, or it's going to delay my treatment or my recovery. أو حدوث مرض, or he thinks that it's going to lead to another to further complications, right? Or sorry, حدوث مرض. حدوث مرض here is the renewal of that sickness, right? That sickness would start again. ويجب الفطر إن خاف هلاكا أو شديد أذى. So it's permissible to that person to break his fast, but it is obligatory for him to break his fast if he fears death or severe consequence, severe health consequence. والحامل إن خافت, and that severe health consequence would be determined by a doctor or by his own experience of his previous experience. والحامل إن خافت على نفسها أو على ما في بطنها أفطرت وقضت ولم تطعم على المعتمد. And a pregnant woman, if she fears for herself, she fears for the child in her womb, and so she breaks her fast and she makes it up, and she doesn't have to feed a hungry person for that day, according to the majority of the scholars, right? And so, but some of the scholars said she'll make it up and she feeds a poor person for that day. والمرضع إن خافت على ولدها مرضا أو زيادته ولم تجد من تستأجره له أو وجدت ولكن لم يقبل الولد غيرها أفطرت وقضت وأطعمت وجوبا. As for the nursing woman, if she fears for the child, that the child would grow sick, or if the child's already sick and that she fears that sickness would continue, and she does not find anyone that she could hire to nurse the child, right? Because you have wet nurses, right? And there's no one around to nurse the child. Or she found someone who could have nursed the child, but the child is just refusing to nurse from her and insists on nursing from the mother. Then aftarat, she may break her fast, and she must make up that day later on, and she must feed a poor person, and it's about $10 or 1 mud, right? But she must do that. She's obligated to do that. والشيخ الهرم الذي لا يستطيع, let's hear. والشيخ الهرم الذي لا يستطيع الصوم من الكبر يطعم إذا أفطر قيل وجوبا وقيل استحبابا. As for an older person who is a much older person, a person who is we say طاعن في السن, right, who is really up there, لا يستطيع الصوم من الكبر, who is not able to fast due to his old age, then what he does is he should break his fast. He should not fast, and it was said by way of obligation, right? He actually is obliged to not fast. And it was also said that it is encouraged. It is encouraged. So it's either permissible, or it's encouraged, or it's obligatory for him not to fast. ومن فرط في قضاء رمضان حتى دخل عليه رمضان آخر فإنه يطعم وجوبا ويقضي ولا يتكرر الإطعام بتكرر التأخير. And so بتكرر التأخير إلى رمضانات أخرى. So whoever has been negligent in making up the fast of Ramadan, such that another Ramadan came, right? Then what he must do is he's got to make up that fast, and he also has to do kafara. He has to feed 60 people by way of obligation. And so ولا يتكرر الإطعام بتكرر التأخير إلى رمضانات أخرى. And so he doesn't have to, basically, it's not compounded even if several Ramadans fast. So let's say he missed 2 days of this Ramadan. Next Ramadan comes and he hasn't made those 2 days up, right? And so he does not, so let's say the next Ramadan comes and he hasn't made it. So there's 2 or 3 Ramadans that come up. We don't multiply those 2 days by 3 Ramadans. So we say, you've got to do 6 days now. We don't do that. He's still going to do just those 2 days from that first Ramadan that he missed. والإطعام مد بمد النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم من غالب قوت البلد عن كل يوم يقضيه. وقال مالك ولا يجزئه أن يطعم أمدادا كثيرة لمسكين واحد. And so the mud, as we said before, is the 2 hands that it's the mud of the Prophet ﷺ. It's the mud that was defined in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and because the mud has changed, the definition of the mud has changed, and the sa, all these definitions have shifted, and so the mud is basically it's the 2 hands that come together of the average size of a man, and that are neither spread forth nor clenched. And Imam Malik radiallahu anhu said that, let's say he says basically that if you have 4 or 5 or 6 days that you have to pay the fidya, that you have to pay for missing those days, right? It was valid. You just got to pay to miss those days. Then basically you don't take all of that money. Let's say it was $10 a day for 7 days. You don't take $70 and give it to one poor person, but it's $10 for each poor person, right? So that's what Malik says. ما يكره للصائم. يكره للصائم ذوق شيء له طعم كالملح والخل والعسل لينظر حاله ولو لصانعه مخافة أن يسبق شيء منه لحلقه فإن لم يصل شيء لحلقه فلا شيء عليه. Okay, so now we're talking about what is makruh. We spoke about what is we just spoke about what is jaiz, what is permissible. Now we're talking about what is reprehensible, or discouraged, highly discouraged. And so it is makruh for the fasting person to taste something that has flavor, right? If it doesn't have flavor, then this. But if it has flavor, like salt or vinegar or honey, in order to see its state, right, in the food, right? Because you want to know, does this soup require more salt, right? Or did I put too much spice in this thing, or does it need more spice? That it is makruh to do that, to actually taste it. It is makruh to do that, because out of fear of it actually reaching the throat. Because once it reaches the throat, you got to make that day up. Let's see. فَإِن لَمْ يَصِلْ شَيْءٌ لِحَلْقِهِ فَلَا شَيْءَ عَلَيْهِ. And so if you do so, if you taste it, let's say you're cooking the meal and you taste it to the where it's on the tongue, and this is how you taste it. You don't actually take the spoon and put all the food in your mouth. You just take a little bit and put it on your tongue, right? To know, is it spicy enough or something like that, or you put it on the tip of your tongue, and then you expel it. That way it has no chance of getting, inshallah, to the throat. Then that's okay, but it's still makruh. It's still makruh. It's makruh, but you don't have to make up the fast. ويكره مضغ نحو لبان ونحو تمرة لطفل ويكره النذر صوم يوم مكرر. And so it is makruh, it is reprehensible to chew gum, right? And we're talking about the type of gum that doesn't have flavor, even the type of gum that doesn't have flavor. If it has flavor, you cannot do that. And like Trident and Bubblicious and Big League Chew, right? Big League Chew. Is Shahzad on today? He would know what Big League Chew is. I don't know. Do you guys know what Big League Chew is? Does anyone here know what Big League Chew is? I want to see some hands. Do you guys know what Big League Chew is? Show of hands if you know what Big League Chew is. Represent. You got to represent it. All right. We got a few people who know what Big League Chew is. That's right. That's right. And if you don't know, you just don't know. You're just not, I'm sorry. You just, like, it's for those who know. Big League Chew, right? Bubblicious. You guys remember Bubblicious? All right. We're still awake, inshallah. Let's see here. So it's makruh to have this type of gum, right? That is flavorless. It's makruh, and I just don't know why anyone would even put that stuff in his mouth. وَنَحْوُ تَمْرَةٍ لِلطِّفْلِ. So if you have a date that you want to moisten for one of your children, it's makruh, right? It's makruh. Find something else to give to your child. وَيُكْرَهُ نَذْرُ صَوْمٍ يَوْمٍ مُكَرَّرٍ. And it is also makruh to take an oath that I'm going to fast every Tuesday, right? Like Tuesday after Tuesday after, I'm going to fast for the next 7 Tuesdays. Like that's makruh, to stipulate a day like that. That's on a weekly basis. Because you just don't know what your circumstances are going to be. You may have to travel. You may have to, you may get sick. You may, like there's, like you want to do the nadhr when you can actually fulfill its purpose, and circumstances are somewhat predictable. وتكره مقدمات الجماع كالقبلة والجسة والنظر المستدام والفكر والملاعبة إن علمت السلامة وإلا حرم لكنه okay, so it is makruh. So basically, foreplay. Foreplay is makruh, like kissing or touching or even looking at like staring and looking and gazing upon the beloved, or even fantasizing or flirting. All of it, and of course, we're talking about your spouse, right? If you are assured that nothing's going to happen, right? It's beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is not going anywhere, right? We're just having fun. So it is makruh. Then it is makruh. But if you're not assured that it's not going to go anywhere, then it's haram, right? All of this stuff is actually haram if you don't have that sort of, that if you don't have that red line drawn very, very thick, right? لكنه إن أمذى فعليه القضاء. But if there is madhi, right, and madhi is is an excretion that precedes ejaculation, right? So it's an excretion that precedes ejaculation. So if that excretes, right, then he has to make that day up. Right? القضاء عليه القضاء وإن أمنى فعليه القضاء والكفارة. But if there is ejaculation, then he has to make that day up and he has to expiate for it, which means that he has to fast 60 days straight consecutively, or he's got to feed 60 poor people, or he has to free the neck of someone who is enslaved. And of course, the third option there is no longer excellent. مندوبات تتعلق بالصيام. مندوبات تتعلق بالصيام. Okay, so مندوبات تتعلق بالصيام. My mind just went somewhere. So these are now things that are encouraged, right? Now you have the mustahabbat, the mandubat. These are things that are encouraged with respect to fasting. ويندب تعجيل الفطر. It is recommended that you break your fast right away after Maghrib comes in, not after your app says that it's in, okay? Because you want to add about 5 minutes to the app times of Maghrib. You want to add about 5 minutes to those app times, because these app times, by and large, they're based on the naval definition of sunset and not true sunset. So true sunset in the Islamic, in Sharia, is when the disk of the sun is totally under the horizon. There is no, the disk of the sun is down, right? Is down. Naval, the naval definition of sunset is when the disk is halfway above the horizon at the median, right? So it's a median sunset that these apps are based on, and the same thing for sunrise, right? Sunrise is the median. It's when the sun is halfway up on the horizon, and so you want to add about 5 minutes just to be on the safe side. And I know that's going to create a lot of ruckus in some of the families, but that's one of the things that we try to institute here at the Mahmoud residence. ويندب تعجيل الفطر. Okay, وكونه على رطبات فتمرات وترا. And also to break your fast on that which is moist, so like moist dates, and an odd number of them. لأنها ترد ما زاغ من البصر, because this will restore a person from a state of dizziness or weariness, or just sort of like I can't even see in front of me. Like this will bring him back, right? Moist dates. فإن لم يجد التمر حسى حسوات من ماء. And if he cannot find dates, then he should sip a few sips of water. وندب تعجيل القضاء لمن عليه دين صوم. And it is also highly recommended that one should expiate for the days that he has missed quickly, right, and not delay that, not postpone that for a person who has to make up days. وَنَدَبَ تَتَابُعُ الصَّوْمِ فِيهِ. And so if there are several days, let's say you missed 3 days in Ramadan, then make those up in 3 consecutive days. That is mandub. وَنَدَبَ كَفُّ اللِّسَانِ عَنِ الْهَذَيَانِ وَعَنِ الْفُحْشِ فِي الْأَقْوَالِ. And it's also mandub to refrain from vain talk, vain speech, evil talk, and in our in what we say in our discourse. وأما الكلام المحرم فالكف عنه واجب في الفطر. As for, now we're reading a book of Mālikī Fiqh here. This is a book of Mālikī Fiqh, and look at what, doesn't this sound familiar? Doesn't it sound somewhat familiar? أما الكلام المحرم فالكف عنه واجب في الفطر. And as for haram speech, right, refraining from it is obligatory after you break your fast as well, right? So during the fast it's obligatory, and after the fast it's obligatory. After you break your fast, it's still obligatory to refrain from that, right? And of course that all of the madhahib are going to agree on that, but it's interesting how in the books of the Malikis, the matters of the heart are right there presented with the rulings of the fiqh. And just like in the beginning of this section, we read about what the essence of fasting really was, right? And it's to draw closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's to refrain from speaking certain things, from looking at certain things. Like we just read that in the very beginning of this chapter, as though we were reading the Ihya. ويتأكد الوجوب في الصوم Oh yeah, okay. So at the time of breaking your fast, it is still wajib on you. It is still obligatory for you to refrain from speech that is forbidden, and so all the more so when you are fasting. وندب صوم يوم عرفة لغير الحاج. And it is also encouraged to fast the day of Arafah if you are not performing the Hajj. وتاسعاء وعاشوراء وصوم المحرم ورجب وشعبان. And fasting the 9th and the 10th day of Muharram, and fasting the month of Muharram, the month of Rajab, the month of Sha'ban, fasting in those months. And this is exactly what we were reading in the Ihya. وَثَلَاثَةُ أَيَّامٍ مِنْ كُلِّ شَهْرٍ, and 3 days from every month, and those are the middle 3 days, right? The days following the bright nights. وَيَوْمُ النِّصْفِ مِنْ شَعْبَانٍ, and the middle of Sha'ban, the 15th of Sha'ban. لِمَنْ أَرَادَ الْإِقْتِصَارِ, and this is for someone who wants, okay, give it all to me just in one paragraph. وَمَنْ قَامَ رَمَضَانَ إِيمَانًا وَاحْتِسَابًا غُفِرَ لَهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِهِ. And the hadith here is quoted that whosoever fasts the month of Ramadan with faith, right, and with the anticipation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward him, all of his sins will be forgiven. وحكم من يتهاون في أمر الصيام مع إقراره بفرضيته أنه مسلم عاص. And the ruling regarding the person who doesn't fast, like the Muslim who doesn't fast. Fasting is obligatory, but it's just not my season. I'll start when I get older, right? So this the ruling of such a Muslim is that of such a person is that he is a Muslim who is disobedient, right? And you'll find in some language that he is a fasiq, right? He's a vile Muslim, just a vile Muslim, but he's still Muslim. وقد وكل الشارع أمره إلى الحاكم فيزجره عن ذلك بما يسمى بالتعزير. And so what you do with such a person is at the discretion of a judge. You bring him before a judge, and the judge decides to do with him whatsoever he will do. And ta'zir is that which is falls short of a hukum, right? Or sorry, of a had, right? So you don't have punitive punishment that is given to him that is related in the Prophet's guidance or in the Quran, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So basically, anything it's below a had, it's below that punitive measure, but it's basically the judge's discretion. The judge could decide to put him in jail for 2 or 3 days, or the judge can decide to put him under house arrest, or the judge could decide to flog him, right, 10 times or something like that. That's all in the judge's discretion. وعلى حكام المسلمين أن يقضوا على ظاهرة الانحراف وخاصة بين الشباب المتهاونين بالقيم والعابثين بالمثل والمستخفين بالواجبات وذلك لكي يحفظوا للإسلام هيبته ومجده. And then he says, and it is upon the governors of the Muslims, the leaders, the political leaders of the Muslims, to adjudicate keeping into consideration the phenomenon of, basically leaving the religion, right, or being wayward in the religion. How there's this assault on religion now, and especially among the youth who are just mutahawinin, who are aloof. Is that the word I want? They don't take it seriously. They don't take these virtues and they don't take these values seriously whatsoever, right? They're just, وَالْمُسْتَخِفِّينَ بِالْوَاجِبَاتِ, and they belittle and those who belittle the obligations, and this is in order to preserve for Islam its veneration and its majesty. And thus concludes our section on the fast, and we have another section here on i'tikaf, and we can go through that section, but we will not finish on time. That's 4 pages on i'tikaf. So I think at this time now, inshallah, we can open this up for questions, and if there is interest, then we can go into the section on i'tikaf at a later time, inshallah. Maybe even right before i'tikaf, we can do that. We can save this, and we'll do a special session, inshallah, right before i'tikaf about how to do i'tikaf. I would be open to that, inshallah, somewhere around the middle of Ramadan. وصلى اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. And so let us see if we have any questions here. I'm going to go up to the chat. Ustad Sabriya, if you're with us and you've been gathering these questions, if you would like, you can add them to our Google Doc.
I did already.
Oh, you did? Okay, very good.
Might need to reload your page though.
All right, let's see.
I had some. There are probably some more that I need to go through.
Okay, there we go. I've got you here. All right.
I'll go through the chat too.
So you deleted all the questions that we've already
I deleted
answered?
the earlier ones.
Okay, very good. If a woman's cycle stops on the fasting day after Fajr and she has already eaten, should she avoid eating for the rest of that day, or can she eat the rest of that day? She can eat the rest of that day, right? That's not a day of fasting for her because she was already into Fajr before the cycle ended. If you travel after Fajr and will be traveling for a long period, an international flight, when do you break that fast? That is a very good question. Basically, the rule is that you break the fast wherever the sun sets, right? Wherever the sun sets. So if you are traveling from the East Coast to the West Coast, right, you're going to have a much longer day. And if you're traveling from the West Coast to the East Coast, you're going to have a much shorter day. Right, and so this is so basically it's where the sun sets. So that's where you're going to break your fast. Yeah. And if it's an international flight, right? Some of these flights are just like they take forever, and the sun is and it's just nighttime for forever, right? Those are definitely times that you want to take the you want to take the license and break your fast. For kafara, can you feed Muslims or non-Muslims? Okay. Yeah, the kafara needs to be for the Muslims. They need to be for the Muslims, and because especially with Ramadan, you want to. There are enough Muslims who are lonely in the month of Ramadan, who are poor, who are without family, and this is a time for community, and it's a time for making sure that those who need it most among our brothers and sisters get it first. Is fidya one kind of kafara? So yeah, fidya is kafara. If kafara is to be understood by its lexical definition and not by its technical definition. So kafara, as we said before, kafara is expiation, and fidya is a type of expiation, right? But kafara technically is fasting 60 days consecutively, or feeding 60 people, or freeing someone who's enslaved. That is kafara technically. Kafara and fidya technically is paying for one person to eat one meal, $10 or one mud, right? And so the fidya is also an expiation. It's also an expiation, but it's an expiation in terms of its linguistic definition or lexical meaning, not its technical meaning. So we can't mix the two. If you make an intention, we can't mix the two technically, but both of them are expiation linguistically. If you make an intention to make up a mandatory fast and then wake up after Fajr has come in, but you don't want to fast that day anymore, do you have to continue to fast anyway? All right. If you make an intention to make up a mandatory fast and then wake up after Fajr has come in, but you don't want to fast that day anymore, do you have to continue that fast anyway? Yes, you must. Yeah, you have to. If you've made the intention to fast, and then you sort of, let's say you made the intention to fast. I'm going to fast tomorrow, and it's nighttime, and then you change your mind after Fajr. You've got to fast the rest of that day. You cannot change your mind, and that is for a mandatory fast, and it's also for a voluntary fast. It's also for a voluntary fast, right? You've got to fast it, and if you deliberately break your fast on a voluntary fast after you've already made the intention to do so and you're in that day, then you make that day up. You've got to make that day up. Okay, so, and that's something I believe that's just particular to the Mālikī, unless you have a good excuse. If you have a good excuse, then you don't need to make that day up, if it's voluntary. And if it's mandatory and you have a valid excuse, then you still need to make that day up. If you, let's see, under what circumstances would someone be justified in commanding you to break your fast? Like the examples that we gave here. Let's say there is we had two examples here, which was a child, not a child like an adolescent, but like me telling my father that you have to break your fast. We've got this dinner out, we've got this brunch, right? We've got guests coming over, or we made this elaborate meal, or don't fast today. I don't want you to fast today. You've got to eat. And so because of some circumstance like that in the house, right, where the wife or the husband has made this elaborate meal, and you really want this person to fast, to break your fast, to partake in the meal, and really to just that atmosphere of we're all sitting here at the table and we're all eating together, partaking of the same meal. If it's if it's the son or the daughter telling the parent, then the parent must break their fast if it's voluntary. Or if the person is telling you you've got to break your fast, like it's a Monday or Thursday, and you're visiting your teacher, or you're visiting an older person in the community, an older community member, then they say, no, you're not fasting today. You're going to have this meal, right? And so in that case, you would break your fast, and you don't have to make those days up. Or if one of the spouses wants to have conjugal relations and the other spouse is fasting, then then you can break your fast to answer the call of your spouse, and you don't have to make that day up. So those are some certain circumstances there. Does secondhand smoking break the fast? Some of us work around smokers. If you can't get away from them, if you can get away from them and you choose not to, right, then that does break your fast if it gets to the throat, right? If it gets to the throat, it breaks your fast. And if you can't help it, and it gets, then you can continue fasting and it doesn't nullify if you can't help it, right? And we covered that. You can go back to the recording. We covered that. We actually talked about cigarettes in particular. If a person cannot fast from food and water for medical reasons and pays fidya, if a person cannot fast from food and water for medical reasons and pays fidya but wants to fast voluntarily during Ramadan, or voluntarily during Ramadan, or the rest of the year from just food, from just food and bad habits, but keep drinking water. All right, I got it. Okay, I had to read ahead. Is that allowed or is not recommended? You can do whatever you want, but at that point you're not fasting. It's not. You have the reward of your intention for fasting. You have your reward of the intention for fasting, but to avoid food and basically I'm going to eat what is absolutely necessary for me to eat just to maintain my health, and I'm going to fast from everything else. That is coming from a person who really loves fasting and who really loves Ramadan. And may Allah bless the person who asked this question, because it really shows that I want to do as much as I can possibly do while keep sustaining my health, right? لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not burden a soul with greater than it can bear. Eat and drink and enjoy the food and the drink. Enjoy it all, because you are not obliged to fast whatsoever. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to enjoy the circumstance in which you are, right? And so if you would like to do that, then go ahead. From bad habits, for sure, right? You want to fast from bad habits for sure. But from the food, that's up to you. If you want to do without the food, just to hold on to some of the traces of Ramadan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for that intention and exalt you. But you are not obliged to do that, right? It is allowed, and so you may do as you choose. Can we get dry cupping and acupuncture while fasting? Yes, you can, although it is not recommended because it's makruh to do so because it may affect your strength. And how old is old age when it comes to not fasting because of old age? Well, it's basically when you get to the age where fasting becomes quite difficult, when it becomes very difficult, right? And it's like and you know when you're there. You know when you're there. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put the barakah in all of your lives. But when you get to the point where this is just okay, I can't, right? That's when the obligation drops for you. And then how do we reconcile wanting to invite the angels into a space by having incense and scents in the house, but also maintaining our fast? There's nothing to reconcile here. It's makruh to have incense, right? And in fact, well, do we read that in the makruhat? No, this is it's actually it's much more serious. It's invalid. It renders your fasting invalid, right? It's not just makruh. It renders your fasting invalid. It's like eating, right? It's like eating during Ramadan. So there is no consideration given to anything else. And the angels would much rather have your deeds accepted as they're praying for you than to be there in the room while you are risking invalidating the fast. And angels come in where there's good cheer, and they come in when there's good deeds, and that's when they call to their other angels to that they come in where there's the recitation of Quran. This is how you bring the angels into your space, reciting the book of Allah, praising the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, speaking to others about the blessings of your Lord. This is what will bring the angels in. If there's incense there or not, that's not. They don't roam around the earth looking for gatherings in which incense is lit. They look around. They roam the earth looking for the gatherings in which Allah's name is mentioned and where His book is recited. And so they'll be there. Don't worry, they'll be there without the incense. Is it allowed not to fast for one of the important nafil fasts? Is it allowed not to fast for one of the important nafil fasting days due to guests coming over? Yes, that's allowed. Because it's nafil, right? It's nafil. It's not nadhr. It's a voluntary fast, and you've got guests coming over. You are encouraged, right? It's not just allowed, but you are encouraged to get them to. You're encouraged not to fast on that day because you got guests, for God's sake, right? So don't fast on a day that you got guests coming over, even if it's a voluntary fast that you've been doing since you were 7. Don't fast on that Thursday. You've got a guest coming over. But if you started the fast, right? You started the fast, and then an uninvited guest came over, unexpected, continue that fast. Does using an inhaler or nasal drip break your fast? So basically, the inhaler and the nose drops. If the inhaler and if taking the inhaler or the nose drops, if that reaches the throat, once it reaches the throat, that means that the person is no longer fasting, right? And so it's not the stomach here, the throat, right? And so I needed to just take a step back and think about that a little bit because I didn't think that through. So that is going to break the fast, and the person has to make up that day, and there's fidya. There's fidya for that. And there's like let's say that this is a condition, right, where he can't spread it out from Fajr to Maghrib, right? Like do it before Fajr and after Maghrib. He's got to do it 2 or 3 times a day during the daytime. Then this situation requires him to do fidya, which is to feed one poor person for each day that he does it. And if this is just how every day, right? It's not like like an exceptional time where he's sick and then he's going to get better, but this is just how he has to take this medicine every single day. Then there's fidya for him, right? So I wanted to make sure that, yeah, so exactly. So when you ask that, let me see here. That question here, also some inhalers need to be spaced 6 to 8 hours apart, and they are for breathing. Exactly. So it's fidya in that case, and they just can't fast. How is it perceived in the religion to the one who asks his parents or children knowing that they are fasting? How is it perceived in the religion to the one who asks his parents or children knowing that they are fasting? I don't understand that question.
I think she's saying that, like, is it a good thing to do? You know, like they have to break their fast. So is it good to even ask them to do so?
To fast with you?
No, to break it. You were saying that, oh, you know, if I asked my parents, then they would break it. But is it good for you to even ask them to do something like that?
Oh, I see.
That's what I understood from the question.
Yeah, intentions are, actions are by intentions, and you want to relieve your father or your mother of the fast. You want to serve them a meal that's going to please them, that's going to that they, you've got their favorite dish on the meal and everything. And I mean, uh, you don't want to frustrate your parents to where, okay, this is just repetitive. Like every Monday and Thursday, you're like, I fast Mondays and Thursdays, so stop commanding me to. And also, you don't want to, like, you got to navigate that. You've got to navigate that. Like if the parent is the type of is headstrong, you don't want to create a problem. I mean, you want to show generosity. You want to show righteous conduct to them. I mean, you're trying to get them to break their fast out of your concern for them and your love for them, and you want to be generous to them. But if it's going to create a problem in the house, then stop. Right? Just let them fast. Let them fast. Just make that meal into a dinner instead. Right. So you want to navigate that. I mean, when is this? Like if the parents live in another state and they're coming to visit you for a week, right? It's like, no, you're not fasting this. You're not fasting this whole week. Mondays, Thursdays. Oh, and you're fasting. Oh, there's three bright. These are the 3 bright nights. You're coming to me in the time that there's the 3 bright nights. I'm sorry, right? Fast on your own time, on your own schedule, right? So that's a certain circumstance, right? But if your parents live at home with you, right? You might not be in the right by insisting every time that they're fasting that they break their fast. Can we fast on behalf of our parents who passed away? No. What we do on behalf of our parents who have passed away, you can do umrah for them, and you can also pray for them, because your prayers for them are deeds for which they are rewarded. But there's no fasting for them. There's no prayer for them either. Like, let's say one of your parents didn't pray or didn't pray for a certain period of time. There's no prayer that you can do on their behalf. Does your own mucus dripping down the back of the throat break your fast? It does not if you cannot actually bring it forward. So let's say you've got some phlegm that you can bring forward, you can easily bring it forward and expel it, then you need to do that. And we were talking about that in light of the vomit that comes up, or I don't know if we colloquially we call it upchuck, right? So if that comes up and you are able to expel it, then you must expel it. And if you cannot, then that breaks the fast. 2 more questions on the document. So let me see the document here. Okay. Allahumma salli wa sallam wa barak ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Ustaz Sabria, where is the Google Doc? Am I in? Oh, there it is. Okay. Wow. So there are more questions here in the Google Doc? Yeah, if you can. Okay. Oh, that's much better. Thank you. All right. So Yeah, I think I'll answer that. I think I'll answer that privately. I'm sorry it took me. I'm sorry it took me such a long time to come to that decision, but I'll answer that. I'll answer the question privately, inshallah. So you mentioned it's makruh to make oaths to fast one day a week, the same day a week, repetitively. What about making an oath to fast for something, fasting until you finish memorizing a surah to ask for Allah's blessings? Yeah, this is Fatima al-Fihriya. If you've ever heard of Fatima al-Fihriya, she is the one who is behind building the oldest university in the world, Al-Qarawiyyin in Fas, Morocco, and she vowed a fast that as long as that masjid was being built, that she would not that she would fast as long as it was, and it took 2.5 years, and that was her nadar. As long as they're building it, I'm going to be fasting, and so that is permissible. Yes. Let's see. Does the Muslima need permission from her husband to fast a voluntary fast? Um, uh, no, she doesn't need permission from her husband to fast a voluntary fast, unless she suspects that her husband may want to approach her for that for a certain day, right? Like they have in the they have what is called. Do we have any young people here? I don't know if we have young people here. Right, we've got some young folks here. That's all right. That's all right. So yeah, the if she suspects, right, if she suspects that today might be a day of romance, then she might want to get his. Then she might want to take consult. And yeah, alhamdulillah. The same is the case for the husband, right? Like if he's expecting that his wife is going to want to approach him that day, then he might want to just take some consult. Yeah. It goes both ways. Okay, so. Oh, you can't unmute. I'm really sorry about that. Why not? What happened to you? Okay, now you should be able to. Um, there's a question here. Let me see. Going back. There's a question here about Hajj. If a person can perform Hajj on behalf of a deceased parent. In the Mālikī madhab, there are three positions on this. One is that it is not permissible. The other is that it is permissible if the person has bequeathed it, right? Has like in his bequest, he has made that request, sort of like when I die, I want you to perform Hajj on my behalf. So that is one other position in the madhab. The other position in the madhab is that so one is that it is not permissible. The other is that it is permissible from the child, and the third is that it is permissible from someone who the person is appointing. But the majority opinion in the madhab is that it is not permissible. In contradistinction to Umrah, Umrah is permissible without any of those stipulations. Let's see here. What if someone is excused from fasting? Let me ask a quick question. Are we over time? What are we supposed to be doing right now?
That's a good question. I think it might be that we're supposed to be on break, maybe.
Supposed to be on break. Okay, so let's gather these questions here, and inshallah.
I think that's the last one.
Is that the last one? What if someone is excused? Because there's also on the Google Doc, right? Or no?
Yeah, but those are finished, except that one.
That one, yeah. Okay. So what if someone is excused from fasting due to a health condition, i.e., diabetes, and pays the entire month's fidya, but also still tries to fast as many days as possible in Ramadan, but has to open the fast? Would they also pay a kafara? What do you mean has to open the fast? He has to begin the fast? Okay, so
I think probably break. Sometimes people use open for break.
Oh,
but
okay. Yeah. Okay.
I'm not sure if you want to clarify. Yeah, that's what I
Break the
thought.
fast. Okay. So, what if someone is excused from fasting due to a health condition, such as diabetes, and pays the entire month's fidya, but also still tries to fast as many days as possible in Ramadan, but has to break the fast? Would they also pay a kafara? No, no. And in fact, if that's the condition that they don't they if that's the condition, there's no kafara here because he didn't. It's a good question because he's fasting, but he gets to a point that and the thing is the by getting to that point where he cannot continue, right? Then that is not the same as a person who, for example, has conjugal relations with his spouse during Ramadan. We're not going to, the kafara is for the latter, not for the former. And so, yes, fidya only. والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد في الأولين وصل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد في الآخرين وصل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد في الملأ الأعلى إلى يوم الدين وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر